In the parking lot of the Grand Harbor, a long-established hotel in the Boston suburbs, Emily Chambers gripped the hand of her 5-year-old son Jacob tightly. The October afternoon sun warmly illuminated her black dress. Today was her sister Sophia's wedding day. "Mommy, is my tie okay?" Jacob asked, touching his chest with his small hand. "Perfect, Jacob. You look very handsome," Emily said, giving her son a gentle kiss on the cheek. Since losing her husband Michael in a car accident 3 years ago, Jacob had been her only family. Well, technically, her mother Margaret and sister Sophia, who would be welcoming them today, were also family, but in the 3 years since losing Michael, Emily had come to realize painfully that blood ties and heart connections weren't necessarily the same thing. As they stepped into the hotel lobby, the voices of relatives they hadn't seen in a long time echoed throughout. Aunt Dorothy was the first to spot Emily and came rushing over with exaggerated gestures. "Emily! It's been so long. My goodness, you've gotten so thin. Are you eating properly?" "Yes, I'm fine. You look well yourself." Emily smiled. Over the past 3 years, she had been working at a small accounting firm while raising her son, and had indeed lost weight. However, it wasn't to the point of harming her health, rather, she had developed a more toned figure. "This must be Jacob. The last time I saw him, he was still a baby, and now look how big he's gotten," Dorothy said, bending down to Jacob's eye level. "You look just like your father. Michael was a good man." Jacob shyly clung to his mother's leg. His memories of his father were vague, but his mother often told him about him. Michael had been an architect, a kind and responsible man. Thanks to the life insurance he had left behind, Emily was able to continue working while raising her son. As they entered the venue, a beautiful space decorated with white and pink flowers spread before them. The sophisticated decoration reflected Sophia's good taste. As Emily searched for their assigned seats, her mother Margaret appeared. "Emily, I'm so glad you came," Margaret said, embracing her daughter. She was a former elementary school teacher who, after retirement, doted on her grandson Jacob. However, from Emily's perspective, her mother's expressions of affection sometimes felt excessive. "Of course, Mom. It's Sophia's special day. Jacob, come to Grandma," Margaret said, lifting her grandson. "I have a special toy for you." She pulled a toy car from a small paper bag. It was a red sports car.
Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home? That's exactly what I did with Reddit stories. No face, no voice. Check the link in the description if you're curious.
Jacob's eyes lit up. "Thank you, Grandma." Emily smiled watching her son's delight, but at the same time felt conflicted. Her mother constantly showed excessive interest in Jacob and frequently interfered with detailed advice about his care. She knew it came from love, but sometimes it felt burdensome. "By the way, did you tell them about Jacob's shrimp allergy?" Emily asked for confirmation, and Margaret nodded. "Of course. I've already informed both the wedding planner and the head chef. A special children's menu has been prepared, so don't worry." Jacob began immediately running his new toy car across the table. He wasn't particularly interested in adult conversations and tended to immerse himself in his own imaginative world. This was the same powers of concentration he had inherited from his late father. Guests were steadily arriving at the venue. Sophia's friends, the groom's family, and relatives they hadn't seen in a long time. Emily continued making social conversation while constantly keeping an eye on her son. She wanted to make sure he didn't get bored and, more importantly, that he stayed safe. Since the accident 3 years ago, Emily thought she might have become overprotective. However, having experienced losing someone she loved in an instant, protecting her remaining son had become her top priority. Today was her sister's happy day. If they could just get through it peacefully without incident, that would be enough. Jacob ran his red toy car while occasionally looking up at his mother with a reassured expression. He too, in his young way, understood the sadness of losing his father. At 2 p.m., the wedding ceremony began. When the venue doors opened, first appeared the bride's father, Emily's stepfather, Robert. He was Margaret's remarriage partner and Sophia's biological father. Emily's relationship with him was good, but the fact that they weren't blood-related sometimes created a subtle distance. Then all eyes focused on one point. Sophia appeared in a pure white wedding dress with beauty that seemed to have stepped out of a painting. The dress, decorated with lace and beads, perfectly accentuated her slim figure. Sophia was the complete opposite of Emily. She was always a glamorous presence who drew everyone's attention. "Beautiful," Jacob whispered softly. Emily, like her son, was captivated by her sister's beauty. It wasn't jealousy, but pure admiration. Sophia had been beautiful since childhood, and she was also sociable. While Emily was introverted and focused on her studies, Sophia had the charm to attract people. David, the groom waiting at the altar, had tears in his eyes when he saw Sophia. At 35, he was a financier working at an investment company, tall with a trim build. He had met Sophia at a mutual friend's party a year ago, and their marriage had come after just 6 months of dating. Emily had initially worried about this sudden development, but seeing the loving way the two behaved together, she was beginning to think her concerns might have been unfounded. The minister's words echoed through the venue. "Beloved friends, thank you for gathering today for the wedding of David Harrison and Sophia Chambers." Emily was remembering her own wedding 3 years ago. Her ceremony with Michael had been smaller, a warm gathering of just family and close friends. In contrast, today's ceremony was a glamorous affair with over 100 invited guests. Neither was better than the other, but each reflected the couple's choice. Vows were exchanged and rings were traded. Sophia's voice trembled with emotion. "David, I'm truly happy to have met you. I'm grateful from the bottom of my heart that we can walk through life together from now on." David's response was also heartfelt. "Sophia, you've brought light into my life. No matter what difficulties arise, I promise to protect and continue loving you." Emily wiped the corners of her eyes with her handkerchief. Next to her, her mother Margaret was also crying. Jacob seemed to sense the solemn atmosphere of the ceremony and quietly placed his toy car on his lap, watching the altar with a serious expression. "Before everyone here, we declare that we will walk forward as husband and wife in a new life together," the minister's voice rang out, and warm applause erupted from the venue. Moving to the reception hall, they found even more glamorous decorations. Each table was beautifully arranged with white roses and pink gerberas, and the gentle light of candles enveloped the entire venue. Emily and Jacob were guided to the family table, where her mother Margaret, stepfather Robert, and other relatives were seated. Before the meal began, there was time for speeches. First, the groom's father stood up. "Our entire family is delighted that our son David has been able to marry such a beautiful woman. Sophia, please take good care of our son." Next, Robert took the microphone. "Since she was small, Sophia has been like sunshine. She always brightened everything around her and brought smiles to our family. Today, seeing her make a happy marriage, I'm truly proud as a father." Emily listened to her stepfather's words with mixed feelings. Robert's affection was genuine, but she herself was often treated as Margaret's daughter from her previous marriage. There was no malice, but a subtle distance always existed. In the greetings from the bride and groom, Sophia became so emotional that her voice choked up. "Thank you so much to everyone here today. I'm especially grateful to the family who has always supported me. Mom, Dad, and Emily." Sophia looked toward Emily and smiled. "Emily has always given me accurate advice when I was confused. Even after losing Michael, the way she continues to live strongly is my role model." Emily felt her chest grow warm at her sister's words. Their relationship had complex aspects, but at its foundation was deep affection. At that moment, Margaret placed her hand on Emily's shoulder. "Aren't you tired?" You look a little pale. I'm fine. Just a little sleep-deprived, Emily answered, but her mother's worried expression continued. Have you been eating properly lately? Maybe you should go easy on the wine. Margaret's questions continued. I'm really fine, Emily said, somewhat confused. She had indeed been busy with work lately and was a bit tired, but it wasn't anything serious. However, her mother's excessive worry was giving the impression that she was ill. Jacob showed no interest in the adults' conversation and quietly ran his red toy car across the table. Occasionally, when he heard laughter from children at other tables, he would look in that direction, but due to his shy tendencies, he didn't actively try to socialize. Jacob, why don't you go play with the other children? Margaret suggested, but Jacob shook his head. I want to stay next to Mommy. Emily gently stroked her son's head. He too, from his experience of losing his father, felt anxious about being separated from his mother. It was a natural reaction. During the entertainment portion, Sophia's friends performed dances, and the venue was filled with cheerful laughter. The bride and groom also joined in the dancing, and the guests applauded. Emily also clapped along with her son while watching her sister's happy appearance. However, her mother Margaret continued to worry about Emily's condition. Are you drinking enough water? Do you feel dizzy at all? Mom, there's really nothing to worry about, Emily answered, but she was beginning to wonder if there was some reason for her mother's almost abnormal concern. However, today was her sister's wedding day. She decided to put such thoughts aside for later. As evening approached, it was almost time for the main dish. Jacob seemed a little tired from the long ceremony and reception, but thanks to his toy car, he was in good spirits. Emily watched her son while wishing this peaceful time could continue forever. After 6 p.m., the soft light of dusk was streaming into the venue. Waiters were bustling around, preparing the main dishes. Each table was scheduled to receive roast beef, grilled chicken, and specially requested seafood plates. Emily was about to call a waiter to confirm what Jacob could eat. For Jacob's portion, please make sure it doesn't contain any shrimp. Understood. We have prepared a special children's menu, the young waiter answered politely. Jacob was still playing with his red toy car, but seemed to be getting a little bored after the long reception. He began a game of making the car run to the edge of the table and then sliding it down like a slide toward the floor. Jacob, be careful not to drop your car, Emily cautioned, but for a 5-year-old boy, it was an attractive game. Sure enough, the toy car flew off the table with momentum, spinning to a stop on the carpet. Jacob hastily lifted the tablecloth and crawled under the table. Jacob, come out from there, it's dangerous, Emily said, but her son was already searching for the toy car in the dark space under the table. Under the table was a cramped space filled with adults' feet and handbags. Jacob was crawling around looking for his red car when he discovered a small white piece of paper that had fallen near his grandmother Margaret's handbag. It was a folded memo paper. Jacob picked it up and, out of curiosity, tried to read the letters. He had recently learned to read simple words. The memo had a short sentence written in neat handwriting. Table 8, please add shrimp to the main dish. Don't worry about allergies. M. Jacob read the letters one by one. Table 8, shrimp. He knew their table number was 8. And the word, shrimp, filled him with a vague fear. It was a word he had heard many times from his mother. Jacob must never eat shrimp. It's very dangerous. In his 5-year-old way, Jacob understood that something was wrong. And he also understood that the M written at the end of the memo was his grandmother Margaret's initial. His small hands began to tremble. Why had his grandmother given instructions to add shrimp, which was dangerous for him? His young mind couldn't understand it, but he instinctively sensed danger. Jacob quickly returned to above the table and, clutching his red toy car, tugged at his mother's arm. Mommy, his voice was small and trembling. What's wrong, Jacob? Did you find your car? Emily noticed something was strange about her son's behavior. "Mommy, let's go home." Right now, Jacob clung to his mother's arm. "What's wrong?" Emily was surprised by her son's unusual behavior. "It's still dinner time. Let's wait a little longer." Jacob glanced toward his grandmother. Margaret was talking cheerfully with other guests and hadn't noticed her grandson's condition. However, for Jacob, that smile was no longer reassuring. "Hey, Jacob. Why do you suddenly want to go home?" Emily peered into her son's face. Jacob answered in a small voice. "You didn't look under the table, did you?" "Under the table?" Emily was puzzled. "What happened?" Her son, trembling, held out the white piece of paper he had been clutching. Emily took it, and the moment she read the contents, the blood drained from her face. "Table 8, please add shrimp to the main dish. Don't worry about allergies. Emily's hands also began to shake. Her son's shrimp allergy was severe. If he consumed it, he would have difficulty breathing, and in the worst case, it could be life-threatening. And this instruction had clearly come from her mother Margaret. Why? Why would her mother give instructions that would endanger her beloved grandson's life? Various questions swirled in Emily's head. And she remembered how her mother had been abnormally worried about her physical condition all day long. As if she had been anticipating something happening. "Mommy, I'm scared." Jacob buried his face in his mother's lap. Emily held her son while looking around. Her mother was still chatting with other guests. Her sister Sophia was talking happily with the groom. The other relatives also seemed to be having a good time. However, to Emily, it all looked fake. Just then, the waiters began bringing out the main dishes. Emily stood up and took her son's hand. "Jacob, let's get out of here right now." "Where are you going?" Margaret turned around. "Dinner has just started." Emily stared at her mother. What was hidden behind that kind expression? 3 years ago, when her husband Michael died, she had received a large life insurance payout. That insurance money was designated for her son Jacob as beneficiary, and she was to manage it as his guardian until he came of age. But if something happened to her, who would be the next guardian? A terrible possibility floated into Emily's mind. Her mother's abnormal worry, and the instruction that endangered her son's life. This wasn't a coincidence. This was something planned. "Mom," Emily said quietly. "We'll be leaving early." "Why?" "Dinner has just started. There's even dessert prepared that Jacob likes." Margaret showed a confused expression. However, to Emily, even that confusion seemed like acting. "I'm not feeling well," Emily answered briefly and gripped her son's hand. Jacob trusted his mother's decision and silently followed. He looked up at his grandmother Margaret, but could no longer feel affection there. Instead, there was an inexplicable fear. "Wait, Emily," Sophia stood up from her seat. "What's wrong?" "It's my wedding day." Emily looked at her sister. Did Sophia really know nothing, or was she an accomplice? Right now, she couldn't trust anyone in her family. "Sophia, congratulations. It was a wonderful wedding." Emily offered her hand. "Be happy." That handshake was a farewell. Emily took her son's hand and tried to leave the venue. At that moment, grandmother Margaret came chasing after them. "Emily, wait. What happened?" Emily turned around and showed her mother the memo she had been clutching. "Could you explain this?" Margaret's face turned pale. In that moment, Emily understood everything. This wasn't an accident. It was a planned crime against her beloved son's life. And the mastermind was none other than her own mother. Jacob gripped his mother's hand tightly and said quietly, "Mommy, let's go home." Emily picked up her son and began walking toward the venue exit. She could hear her mother and sister's voices behind her, but she didn't look back. When Emily turned toward the hotel lobby, she heard hurried footsteps chasing her from behind. Looking back, she saw her mother Margaret and sister Sophia running breathlessly. Sophia was holding up the hem of her wedding dress, desperately chasing her sister. "Emily, please, wait," Sophia's voice was mixed with tears. "What happened? My wedding is being ruined." Emily stopped and turned around while holding Jacob. Her son clung to his mother's neck and turned his face away from his grandmother and aunt. "Sophia, I'm sorry, but this isn't about your wedding." Emily's voice was calm, but deep anger lurked beneath it. "Ask Mom. Have her explain this memo." Emily held out the white piece of paper again. Sophia took it and read aloud. "Table 8, please add shrimp to the main dish. Don't worry about allergies. M." Sophia's face turned pale. This is about Jacob's shrimp allergy, right? But why would there be a memo like this? Emily stared at Margaret. "Please explain. Why did you give instructions that would endanger my son's life?" Margaret was pressing her trembling hands to her mouth. In that moment, the mask of the kind grandmother fell away from her expression. The face of a cornered woman was there. "Emily, you're misunderstanding," Margaret said in a shaking voice. "I love Jacob. Why would you think I'd do such a thing? Then what is this memo?" Emily raised her voice. "It's in your handwriting, isn't it? The reason you were abnormally worried about my physical condition all day was because you knew something was going to happen, wasn't it?" Other guests in the lobby noticed the commotion and turned around. However, Emily no longer cared about the stares of others. Her son's safety was the top priority. "Mom, surely you didn't really?" Sophia looked at her mother with an expression of disbelief. At that moment, Margaret suddenly broke down crying. She fell to her knees on the floor and covered her face with both hands. I'm sorry." Emily and Sophia watched the scene in shock. Jacob made himself small in his mother's arms. "I'll tell you everything," Margaret said through her tears. "But not here, somewhere quiet." In a private room in the corner of the hotel lounge, Margaret opened her heavy mouth. Sophia had chosen to be present despite being in the middle of her wedding. She had told the groom David that there was a family emergency. "It's about Michael's life insurance money," Margaret began in a small voice. "Jacob is the beneficiary, and you're managing it as his guardian." Emily listened silently. That was correct. After her husband's death, she had been carefully managing those funds for her son's future. "If something happened to you, I would become the next guardian," Margaret continued. "And there are problems with Sophia's marriage that you don't know about." Sophia looked up. "Problems with my marriage? What are you talking about?" Margaret stared at Sophia. "David's investment company went bankrupt 3 months ago. He's carrying enormous debt." Sophia stood up. "That can't be true. David is a successful investor. I heard his company was doing well." "Sophia, sit down," Margaret's voice was exhausted. "David is on the verge of bankruptcy. And he came to me asking for help. As a condition of marriage, he demanded that I take over his debts." Emily was beginning to see the whole picture. "So if I died in an accident, you would become Jacob's guardian and could manage the insurance money. You would use that money to pay off David's debts and protect Sophia's marriage." I was cornered. Margaret held her head. "I wanted to protect Sophia's happiness. And David threatened me. He said if I couldn't pay back the debt, the marriage would be called off." Sophia collapsed into her chair. "My marriage was about money problems. David doesn't love me." "I don't know about that," Margaret answered. "But he was definitely in financial trouble. And he was targeting our family's assets." Emily held her son on her lap while thinking calmly. "So what was today's plan? After my son had an allergic reaction and was taken to the hospital, were you planning to do something to me too?" Margaret shook her head. No, not that far. Just while Jacob was hospitalized, I was going to slip you sleeping pills and make it look like an accident. You mean you were planning to kill me and make it look like an accident? Emily's voice was cold as ice. I was confused. I couldn't make normal judgments. Margaret continued crying. I just wanted to protect my beloved daughter's happiness. Sophia stood up. You were going to kill my sister and nephew for my sake. You thought that was my happiness. Sophia, you don't understand. You're being deceived by David. He's a man covered in debt who's targeting our assets. Then why didn't you tell me that from the beginning? Sophia's voice shook with anger. Why did you choose to kill my sister? Emily stood up and took Jacob's hand. That's enough. I don't need to hear any more. Emily, wait, Sophia pleaded. I didn't know anything. I really didn't know anything. I understand that, Sophia. Emily looked at her sister. But we're not family anymore. The moment Mom tried to kill us, everything ended. Margaret stood up. Emily, please. I made a mistake. But Jacob is my grandson. Don't take him away from me. You tried to kill my son. Emily's voice was resolute. Never come near us again. Emily pulled her son's hand and tried to leave the private room. At that moment, Sophia came chasing after them. Emily, what should I do? The wedding. David? Emily turned around. That's for you to decide, Sophia. But one thing I can say is that there's no real happiness in a relationship with a man who marries for money. Emily left the hotel with her son. It was completely dark outside, but a light of determination shone in her heart. From this day forward, their new life would begin. In the car, Jacob said in a small voice, Mommy, won't we see Grandma anymore? That's right, Jacob, Emily stroked her son's head. But we have each other. That's enough. Jacob nodded as if he understood. 3 months later, in a small apartment in Portland, Oregon, Emily was greeting a new morning with her son Jacob. The autumn sunlight streaming through the window illuminated their modest but warm living room. It was a contrast to their luxurious life in Boston, but here there was peace more precious than anything. Mommy, can we go to the park today? Jacob asked while eating his breakfast cereal. Of course, Emily answered with a smile. Maybe you'll make some new friends. The decision to leave Boston hadn't been easy. However, Emily had no choice. After leaving the hotel that day, she had immediately contacted a lawyer and consulted with the police. Restraining orders had been issued against Margaret and Sophia, and she was legally protected from them as well. In the new city, Emily had started working at a small accounting firm. The salary was less than her job in Boston, but she was able to spend more time with Jacob. She continued to carefully manage the insurance money that her husband Michael had left for their son's future. On her desk lay 3 unopened letters. All were letters of apology from her mother Margaret. Emily had never opened them and intended to dispose of them. No matter how much she was apologized to in words, the fact that her son's life had been targeted wouldn't change. Jacob was adapting well to his new environment. He had made friends at the local kindergarten and seemed brighter than before. Sometimes he would ask about his grandmother, but Emily explained, she lives far away, so we can't see her for a while. Mommy, when can we visit Daddy's grave? Jacob suddenly asked. Emily was momentarily at a loss for words. Michael's grave was in Boston, and they couldn't easily visit it. However, she wanted to cherish her son's feelings toward his father. We'll definitely go someday. Daddy is happy that we're living healthily. A few days later, Emily found an article about Boston in the local newspaper. Sophia and David's marriage had broken down in just 2 months. According to the article, David's investment fraud had been discovered, and he was being sued by multiple investors. Right after the wedding, Sophia had learned the truth and immediately started divorce proceedings. Emily read the article with mixed feelings. Her anger toward her sister remained, but at the same time, she thought that perhaps she too had been a victim. However, she had no intention of making contact. Another article also reported that her mother Margaret was living alone. Neighbors said, "She's looked very lonely lately." Estranged from Sophia and unable to see her beloved grandson, she was probably feeling the weight of her choices. Emily folded the newspaper. The future with her son was more important than sympathy for the past. In the evening, while Jacob was playing with other children at the park, Emily was talking with a young mother sitting on the next bench. "Your son is very bright," the woman said. "He became friends with my daughter right away." "Thank you. Actually, we just moved here recently." "I see. If you ever need anything, please don't hesitate to ask. Everyone in this town is kind." Emily felt warmth. It was different from the glamorous social circles of Boston, but here there were genuine human relationships. That night, after putting Jacob to bed, Emily stood by the window looking up at the night sky. It was a quiet town where the stars could be seen clearly. "Michael, we're okay," she spoke to her late husband in her heart. "Jacob is growing up healthy too. True family isn't about blood ties, but about caring for each other." The next morning, Jacob said at the breakfast table, "Mommy, I'm happiest when I'm with you." Emily hugged her son. "Me too, Jacob. We're a small but very strong family." She had lost her wealthy life in Boston, but Emily didn't regret it. She had found real happiness that money couldn't buy, together with her son. And she was confident that no matter what difficulties lay ahead, the two of them could overcome them together. In the new town, a new life was beginning. Every day of building true family bonds while overcoming the pain of the past was there.